Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2022 film The Black Phone, and I finally got around to seeing it. I saw a lot of good things about it online, so I considered paying for it at one point, but I'm actually glad I didn't because I didn't like it nearly as much as everyone else did, to be honest. It's not a bad film by any stretch. It's an okay-ish film for me personally, and I'll tell you why, the things I liked, the things I didn't like about it. But also, as with any video, feel free to leave your comments on how you felt about this film. Give me like a sentence or two. Don't just say, I really liked it, I really didn't like it. Just give me a sentence or two telling me what you did or didn't like about the film. And you can talk spoilers in the comments. Go ahead. So just know there could be spoilers in the comments. So let's get into this. Directed by Scott Derrickson, who also did Hellraiser Inferno, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, The Day the Earth Stood Still, one of many done. Sinister, that's a really good, actually like legit scary film that I've seen. Sinister 2 was good too. Deliver Us from Evil and Doctor Strange, which I thought Doctor Strange was really good too. Really enjoyed that one. This film was written by Derrickson as well as C. Robert Cargill, who wrote scripts for Sinister, Sinister 2, and Doctor Strange. That's a good resume right there. And based on story by Joe Hill. So there are some themes that are very Joe Hill-esque. And there are a lot of Joe Hill-esque themes that are very much like his father's themes, Stephen King. So, yeah. I'll talk about that at the very end a little bit in case nobody wants anything spoiled as far as like themes and subtext, because this is a no spoiler review until I get to that very end where I'm just going to talk a little bit about themes and subtext. I'm not going to talk about like actual events of the film. Apparently Derrickson has said that the film's The 400 Blows and The Devil's Backbone were influential films for this. There's something very particular done within this film that I really saw the devil's backbone in it. It's a way something is shot. It's an idea that comes into it. I assume it was obviously something that was in the source material, the book itself, but the way it's shot, I was like, oh yes, devil's backbone-esque. I see that influence right here. So, very quick synopsis, not going to give too much away for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. It is about a kid who is abducted by a guy in the neighborhood, well, in the area known as the Grabber. He's a child abductor and killer, and he had already abducted a bunch of kids prior to this main character. I think like 4 or 5, something like that. So he knows he's in a bad situation. So it's really about him being locked in this basement and kind of the somewhat of a cat and mouse game that goes on between he and the Grabber, and then the outside forces who are trying to find him, and it's kind of like this race against time situation. So there is some intensity to it. There is like a good amount of dread baked into the film, and there's like a bit of a mystery element because they're obviously trying to find out where's this house, where's the kid being kept, who is this person, all that type of stuff. So okay, it establishes a 70s kids carefree summer vibe immediately, which is fun. That's in the very beginning, like the scene before the title. But then the opening credits get dark and depressing with intense music. Yeah, that shift was really sudden, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It was a good shift because it's like, oh, look, everything's really nice and carefree, and these kids just hanging out, having a good time. And then all of a sudden, it's like dread, and it makes that twist where you're just like, okay, now we're getting serious, now we're getting real. It gives you the idea of what you're going to expect, like things going just fine, and then it's going to be rough. The look of this is actually very 70s drab, kind of like palette with a lot of like yellows and browns put into it, and black and gray. So very drab, very dark colors, very blah colors, which makes sense because it's a depressing subject matter. So it goes with the actual emotions that they're trying to get out of people with watching this film. Great, smooth camera work. A lot of really interesting kind of engaging camera movements. So cinematography was good. The directing was really good too. Acting really good, the music was good, and they didn't overdo it with the music. It was a pretty restrained score, which I'm a big fan of. So from a technical standpoint, a lot of good things done with it. Pretty early on, there are inklings that the story will have a very creative element thrown in. I'm not going to go any further than that. I'm choosing my words very carefully because I don't want to ruin anything for people going into this film pretty much blind story-wise. But there's something introduced pretty early on where you're like, oh, I thought this was potentially, like, as far as, like, this real-world situation, I thought it was going to be kind of straightforward, but it's not. There's a certain element that gets thrown in that's a little fantastical, I guess is kind of the way I can put it, but not spoil anything. Some of the acting goes over the top at a few moments. Yeah, I said for the most part the acting was really good. The characters who mattered most were really good for the most part. There were a few characters who went a little too far with their acting, where you were like, okay, this is stepping over the line into just kind of like ridiculousness. It's a little hilarious. And I actually did have a problem with the way that the character Ethan Hawke was playing, the grabber, was being played. You never see his entire face throughout the entire thing, and it doesn't really matter because everyone knows going into the film it's who Ethan Hawke is. Like, you know what he looks like, so seeing his face isn't like something that actually matters in the film because everyone knows it's Ethan Hawke playing the character. I mean, you do find out about the grabber, which is what you're really looking for a lot. That's the second thing you're really looking for. The first thing is you're looking for this main character to get out of danger. For sure. And I won't tell you whether that happens or not. You know there's something significant about the black phone because it's the actual title of the film. Yes, I'm not going to go much into it, although I know that if you've seen a trailer or if you've read any sort of, even a non-spoiler review, they say extra stuff about the phone itself that I really don't think people should say. Let people go in as blind as possible. So there is something very important about the phone, obviously, because it's called out with the actual title of the film, which is kind of why I kind of think they should have picked a different title for it, because it would have been more interesting once the phone itself gets introduced, as opposed to you're just looking for the black phone as soon as the film starts. You're just like, I already know there's something with a phone. Let's get to it. Things are dark, but still well lit. I mean, obviously it's dark material, but lighting wise, like, it's dark, but it's lit well enough that you can see exactly what you need to see. So great job with that. It's something that there have been problems with. I mean, the most recent Hellraiser film, I thought there were some real problems with not having good enough lighting when it was dark, just being too dark. In a film like this, they did the right thing. They're like, it's dark, but you can see everything you still need to see. So that was great. They had a few moments in this film where they used slow motion, and I felt like they used slow motion too much. I think there's like 5 or 6 different segments where they use slow motion. It can be good and it can be impactful, but if you use it as much as they used it, it kind of loses its luster. It loses the ability to have impact. I think they should have just saved it for the very end of the film, how they used slow motion there, because then it has more impact. But the fact that they did it so much in the beginning of the film just kind of like cheapened it, in my opinion. You could do like one in the beginning, one in the end. That'd be fine. But I didn't understand it. They went too hard on the slow motion. It was kind of an odd decision. There are solid tense moments, like I talked about. They did a good job of building some decent tension from time to time. There are some plot holes involving things that people would or would not do in certain situations. Obviously, once again, trying to be non-spoilery here. So if you've already seen the film, really think about what people do in this film and the situations that people are in this film, and you will see there are some plot holes. There are like things that people wouldn't actually do. There's things that people wouldn't actually be able to do. And that's one of my big issues with the film. It kind of took me out of it, and I was kind of like, you built this world as being very believable as like real world in the 70s, but then these kind of ridiculous things happen, and you're like, There's a kind of twist that I saw coming that doesn't really have much impact on the story, and probably just should have been left out of the film in general. It has something to do with a character that's in the film who's not really in the film all that much. And so when there's something regarding that character that happens, it's kind of like, this doesn't even really matter. Like, why is this even in the story, to be honest? Like, sure, for some people it'll add like a slight bit of intrigue, and I mean, I guess it does to some degree. But to me, I was just like, okay, we wasted time on this. And I'm going to be honest, this film should have been cut down. The runtime is too long. It's like close to an hour and 50 minutes. There's no way, absolutely no way this should have been that long. I mean, it needs 15 minutes at least cut off of it, to be honest. The pacing's not the greatest. It's not horrible, though. Like, the pacing's not horrible, but it should have and could have been really tightened up. When the big moment in the film happens, super unbelievable. I mean, I know a lot of people probably just get, like, wrapped up in that moment because it is, like, the big moment and there is a certain emotion that it makes people feel. But if you're really watching it and you're really paying attention, like with me, I was like, this is not believable, and this is ridiculous. Come on now. Plus, you know, there had been a few things leading up to that where I was like, not believable. This is kind of ridiculous. So yeah, anyway. There is a transformative journey for the main character in this that's pretty solid. I do like what happens with character growth within this film, being the main character. That is an interesting aspect of the film. And I think it was handled relatively well. Like, you definitely look at the film and you see, like, at one point very early on what this character's like, and then at another point much later on what this character's like. And you're like, okay, I see a lot of development here. Overall, the film is okay-ish. And the black phone itself, unimpressive, in my opinion. What they did with the black phone, I understand the idea behind it, but I think the way it was executed came off as a little ham-fisted, and it just did not play all that well to me. I think they should have played it more kind of like dread-filled scary, and it just was a little ridiculous. Maybe it's just me, I don't know, because I know a lot of people love this, but it was just a little ridiculous. And Ethan Hawke, his character is the grabber. I think it should have been darker. Now, I don't know if this was his choice to play the character that way, and the writer-director just went with it, or if it was the writer-director's idea, like, this is what I want out of you, because, you know, sometimes it goes both ways. His character gets cartoonish at times. And this is the type of film where you really want to make people, like, scared of a character like that. And at no point was I scared of that character. I was just like, they're eccentric. It's just like this eccentric, weird, cartoonish at times character, which doesn't translate well to, like, being scary to an audience member like myself. So I just didn't like the way they chose to play that character. Like the masks, though. There's, like, a bunch of changes of all these masks that get used. The design of the masks were really, really cool. And I think they were kind of there to also show certain emotions and kind of tie into who that character is, which was cool. Film, I'm going to reiterate, the film needed to be cut down a bit for pacing because it's not the best. Well, I'm going to say something about, like, theme stuff here, so if you don't want to know that at all, you can stop. But as this is a Joe Hill piece of material, there are themes of abuse and bullying, which is also something that's mined heavily in his father's works, Stephen King. A lot of, like, abuse and bullying. There's an aspect of, like, familial stuff and even abuse having to do with familial situations, relationships like that. Also something that Stephen King did a lot of. Both of them do a lot of that, usually to very successful degrees. This one I didn't think it played as well. The whole film to me seems like a metaphor for the imprisonment created by abusive relationships in general. Because there's not just one main one going on here. There are multiples at play. So I think that was kind of like the overall statement that's at play here. So when you step back from it and you look at it in that sense, it is kind of interesting. Because it is about one main event. But when you look at what else is going on in the film that's not focused on as much, it also factors in very heavily to what's at play with an overall story. It's just a lot of people probably don't step back and look at that. So I think it's kind of effective for that. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to give it a 3-star rating. I'm going to be generous. I wanted to give it 2.5 because I'm like, I mean, there are good things. Obviously, there are things I really don't like about it, but I'll give it 3 stars. It's okay. I'm just not a huge fan. I don't know. Maybe someone can kind of change my mind. Like, give me your reasoning in the comments for, like, what did you love about this film? I'm always open to hearing different perspectives. I love hearing different perspectives because maybe that can kind of make me feel a little differently about these things. So would love to hear from you. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Do me a favor, hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I would greatly appreciate that. It keeps me motivated. I'm very thankful when people are joining this nerdy horror community I'm creating. It's just fun. Also, the comments are a lot of fun to interact with everyone, which I'm sorry if it takes me a bit to get to the comments. I'm one person, and I do get a decent amount of comments. Also, hit the subscribe and also hit the notification bell button on my channel, because then you'll know when I'm putting out new videos, which I'm doing at least 4 at this point. And other than that, thanks for checking out this video. I appreciate it. And until next time, keep it brutal.